It might be better.
Way better. Turn on.
Right. Lisa, when we get started, perhaps closing the windows. Might help. It was a nice big day. That's not even me. Yeah. Dean is, yeah.
She's just doing, she's a shorter.
Oh, that's right. She does,
She does have, yeah.
that's right.
She's not interested in running off.
Nor was I. Although it's great conditioning.
Yeah, she could do this.
Yeah.
But. Well, thanks. And thank you. This week.
Okay. I think we'll get started.
Recording in progress.
Good evening, everyone. All right, calling to order the October 23rd meeting of the Newton School Committee. Hello to everyone in the school committee chamber and to everyone joining us from home. If anyone is looking for a seat and doesn't have one, we do have reserved capacity in room 111 downstairs of the Ed Center. So during our last school committee meeting on October 11th, I began our meeting with a clear and unequivocal statement on behalf of the entire school committee, urging our district and our community to remain vigilant and guard against the division of hate from anti-Semitic, anti-Muslim, anti-Israeli, or anti-Palestinian rhetoric in the wake of the current crisis in Israel and Palestine. During our public comment tonight, we will hear from a number of community members who will share their perspective regarding the district's communication to families across this crisis. We will listen, as we do, to all of our feedback from public comment. But let me reiterate that this district and this committee has the following position. The Newton Public Schools offers supports to all students of all faiths, of all backgrounds, equally, without reservation, and with the same degree of care and dedication to their needs. Thus, let us turn now to public comment. And for folks who are filing in, please do so quietly. The public comment is a period reserved for members of the public to address the school committee and for the committee members to directly hear your concerns and perspective. We do not respond in this context, but we will listen and seriously consider the feedback that we hear. Scheduled conversations are available in alternate formats. Members of the public joining us in person must please refrain from applause, outbursts, or disruptions. Tonight, we have far more requests for public comment than can be accommodated in our reserved time. I will be able to recognize more speakers if I don't have to pause for disruptions. Remote speakers, please ensure that your Zoom name matches the name that you use to request to speak. This will allow us to identify you. In-person speakers, I will call names from our posted sign-up sheet. When called, remote speakers will be able to unmute, state name and address, and take up to 3 minutes to share concerns with this committee. In-person speakers, when called, please come to the table in front of the committee, use the microphone to state your name and address before beginning your remarks. Both groups of public commenters will have a 30-second verbal warning before time expires, given by our Vice Chair, Kathy Shields. With that, we will start with our first few remote commenters. And I'll say once again, we do have reserved seating capacity in room 111 downstairs. Our first remote speakers are Asia Ray, followed by Courtney Foster, and then I'll turn to some in-person speakers. Stephen, do you see Asia Ray?
She's coming in now. Courtney Foster is not on though.
Okay.
Hello, okay. Am I speaking now?
We can hear you, yes.
So first, fair contract for educators. I have no points to add that our brilliant educators haven't added themselves. But quickly, I wanted to speak about when Hamas attacked Israeli families. I checked in with my Jewish and Israeli friends. All of them were grieving. Many of them were afraid. Of course they are. This attack was horrific. And then I asked what support looks like for them. The request for those close enough to be honest with me all asked for one thing: protect Palestinian families. So it turns out that my Israeli friends aren't allowed to express horror or grief over the US and Israeli government's treatment of Palestinians. If they express any empathy, anything that even appears to sound like a call for a ceasefire, even mentioning Palestinians as the indigenous people of the land occupied by Israel, their families will be arrested by the Israeli occupying forces. My Palestinian and Muslim friends in NPS have expressed an even deeper fear around speaking up. For those who haven't already fled Newton's public schools from the rampant harassment and Islamophobia common here in Newton, they've told me stories of their children actively hiding their pain and terror at school, afraid to express grief over loved ones under siege in Gaza. They're not just afraid of bullying from students, although that is a very valid fear. They're afraid of our administration. Every time a principal or a leader in our community expresses sadness or support for the Palestinian children impacted by a horrific genocidal blockade that has killed over 5,000 Palestinians, including over 2,000 children in less than 2 weeks, they are forced to immediately retract their statements due to threats of defunding NPS, threats on their lives, threats of being called anti-Semitic for not standing unequivocally with a foreign government that we as American citizens have no allegiance to. I'm wondering, who are these people who equate being anti-ethnic cleansing with being anti-Semitic? It feels insane, but it also feels like an orchestrated attack to keep Palestinian, Muslim, and Arab students out of our schools, to normalize hate and xenophobia against brown families. Already, a Newton mother has lost her job and is getting death threats after false claims of anti-Semitism. American children have been attacked, and it's all increasing amidst actual anti-Semitism and hate against Jewish students here in Newton, diverting our attention from those who want us divided and want us afraid of each other. And it's always been scary to whisper the word Palestine in Newton. Supremacy has thrived in silence, and if we keep leaving individual educators, individual families, and individual leaders to fight the threats alone, we will never be free. So I'm holding space for the humanity and development of some children, and we are holding the space for humanity and development of some children in our schools with very pro-Israeli letters and documents. And we are conspicuously withholding empathy and comfort and allyship and affinity spaces for others. This is a violation of civil rights for those children who can't speak up and talk about what it's like to be attacked. And this is all folding under threats of being called anti-Semitic in support of Newton Jewish and Muslim community. It hurts our students who truly are being targeted by horrific anti-Semitic attacks. I can't speak to the number of children I have heard who have either left Newton already and are definitely not coming back after this, or who are planning to leave Newton because they are.
Public speaker Courtney Foster. Thank you once again, Asia. If not Courtney, we'll go to Cole Burke, spelled Kolbirke, Stephen. Thank you.
Hi, thanks so much. I want to just reiterate the support for the teachers, the administration, and when it comes to this discussion, as a Jewish person in Newton, I've been most moved throughout my life by the social justice of the Jews that I've known in America, and all of the faculty, the NPS faculty, the school committee, the administration that I've met have really wanted to care for all of our children. And I just want to put all of my weight behind that faculty and administration in supporting all of Newton's children. Thank you.
Thank you, Cole. Up next, we will go to one of our our in-person speakers. We have Audrey Berkman, apologies.
My name is Rabbi Audrey Marcus Berkman, and I live at 183 Melrose Street in Newton. I'm the mother of a 4th grader at Burr Elementary School and a 9th grader and 12th grader at Newton North. As you know, 17 days ago, the Jewish people suffered the greatest loss of life and the greatest catastrophe to have happened to our people since the Holocaust. We are a very small people. We constitute 0.2% of the world population, and half of us live in Israel, so we're all 1 to 2 degrees of separation at best from those murdered, taken hostage, injured, and deeply traumatized. I do not see this as a Palestinian versus Israeli situation, and that is how it's been phrased in many of the school communications. The Israel-Gaza situation is one of those misnomers. This is Israel and Palestinians against Hamas, who has been holding their own people hostage. The worst thing to happen to the Palestinians in a very long time. We all must rise up together to fight this terrible, terrible evil backed by Iran, by Russia. These are the same folks, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. If you did not equivocate about 9/11, you must not equivocate about what is happening right now. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is certainly complicated. I've spent much of my life educating around it, and I have deep relationships with people on, quote, both sides, although I don't see it as so simple. Many, many peace workers and advocates were murdered on October 7th. But we Jews didn't have time to be together in the shock and horror of it and to grieve, because we have had to fight a massive wave of Jew hate. I don't want to call it anti-Semitism. There are Semitic peoples who are not Jews. It's not Israel hate, it's Jew hate. And the emails sent by many of our schools did not name what happened as a massacre of Jews or make any mention of the immediate and constant rallies and rhetoric taking place across the country, including places as nearby as Cambridge and probably closer, calling to gas the Jews and to cleanse the world of Jews. And these are supposedly pro-Palestinian rallies that are saying they're happy about the heroic acts of the Hamas resistance fighters and calling them heroes. We as a school system must take a stand against such violent, horrific hate and barbaric terrorism. I deeply appreciate the support from our superintendent, and all the leaders of all of our schools need to lead against Jew hate as strongly as any other kind of hate. Jew hate is not political. None of us deserve to die. If you believe that, that we don't, please stand with us and for our right to exist and for the one Jewish nation on earth to be able to defend itself
Of 30
against terrorism.
seconds.
I call upon you to at the very least make a firm commitment at the elementary level that anti-Semitism by name will be incorporated into the curriculum, just as if this happened to another marginalized group. Our kids are very scared. They know what has happened. Our Jewish kids don't understand why they are not hearing about this in school. I know you want to support our kids. My elementary child has been sleeping in my bed, and a friend's child has asked if he'll be able to take a stuffed animal with him if Hamas comes to kidnap him. I've had to.
Your time is up.
Thank you.
Chair.
Thank you, Audrey. Our next in-person public speaker, public commenter will be Catherine Tissier.
My name is Catherine Tessier, 89 Crescent Street, Auburndale, Mass. I'm a teacher at Newton North, and this is my 10th year teaching in the Newton Public Schools. Over 250 children in the Underwood School Committee will recognize this woman sitting next to me as their kindergarten teacher extraordinaire, Miss Kristen Fucarley. She has been a member of NPS for 12 years. And to thank her for her years of service, this year she's teaching without a kindergarten aide for half of the day. But that is actually not why we're here. We're here to address your proposed policies around teacher attendance. We are no longer new teachers, and we won't be impacted by your proposal to reduce first-year teacher sick days and to not allow first-year teachers to access the sick bank. Yet we were both educators who benefited from the sick bank in our first year in Newton. And in the years after our first year, we both felt this deep sense of pay it forwardness to NPS. We took on extra committees, unpaid volunteer positions, coaching, mentoring, you name it. Your investment in us had paid dividends. For me, my now third grader was born the year I accepted a .64 teaching position at Day Middle School. As an employee within their first year on a new job, I was not eligible for FMLA. But thanks to the sick bank, my family stayed afloat. I was honored to be in a school district that took care of me. And while it was soul-crushing to leave an 8-week-old baby with a stranger, I reminded myself that I was lucky, I had insurance, I had a good job, and I lived and worked in a great community. But enough about me. In honor of Breast Cancer Awareness Month, I'd like to tell you a story about a survivor. In Kristen's first year teaching in Newton, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. She was 29 years old and scared, but she finally had her dream job of teaching in Newton. Despite her big sister pleading with her to take the year off, Kristen was determined to keep working and do the best she could during 16 rounds of chemo and surgery. Kristen missed 28 days of school that year, but I guarantee you her absences are not what those students remember about kindergarten. I bet they remember about learning about hygiene and how to have difficult conversations and how our physical bodies can change when we're sick and how much their teacher loved them. Kristen was immediately supported by families, colleagues, and most importantly, the sick bank.
You have 30 seconds.
This gave her the opportunity to focus on her health while still maintaining a biweekly paycheck. It might seem that this is the strong hand you're required to play in negotiations, but it's cruel. We used to work in an NPS that assumed best intentions. Rather than creating an environment where your staff is scared to take a day off or from themselves or take care of a child or elderly parent, why don't you treat us like the professionals that we are, stop the games, and give us a fair contract?
Thank you. I'll pause to wait for the applause to die down. As a reminder, the more I have to pause for disruptions, the less public commenters we can accommodate. Our next, and also a word about conversations within the school committee chamber. We can hear, and it does present a disruption. So if you need to make a comment to somebody, please step outside. We'd appreciate that. Our next public speaker, remote public speaker, Stephen, if you could prepare them. Melissa Chu.
Courtney's on as well.
Okay, thank you, Stephen.
Both Courtney and Melissa are available. I don't know which one you want to take first.
We'll start with Melissa and then we'll go to Courtney.
Hi, good evening. My name is Melissa Chu, and I live in Newtonville. I have a third grader in Cabot Elementary. I really struggled to write what I was going to say tonight. And ultimately, there's a lot of, there's a phrase in my Buddhist practice of like, always already thinking. And in my head, I'm always already thinking, and I have a lot of statistics and information from my head that I could share tonight. And I will email that to the school committee. But I thought I'd take this opportunity tonight in this short time that I have to just speak from the heart, speak from my body, which is hard to do a lot of the times, but I think our body wisdom can really guide us in really difficult times like this. And for me in this conversation, specifically with our school leaders and our school committee and the many people who work so hard to take care of our children, my heart goes out to families on all sides who have been impacted. I've heard stories, we all have. And I would say that specifically in our schools, I mean, there's so much that we can talk about intellectually and politically, and it's a complex history and situation. But for our schools, we should be able to do the position that Tamika had stated in the beginning of this meeting, that call to service to all of our students should be, I would hope that's something that we could all come together as a community, that shouldn't be contentious. There's a lot of things that are contentious, but that I would hope that it wouldn't be contentious to anyone that someone else's child is getting the support that they need to feel as safe and welcomed as possible in our schools. And I don't believe that's happening right now. Specifically talking to Muslim and Arab and Palestinian related families, they don't feel seen or heard right now. They don't feel safe. And as someone who's not personally connected to either side, I do have to say that it feels a bit imbalanced in terms of the statements that have been issued. And I recognize that there's a larger political pressure that influences all of that. But I hope that we can take this time to prioritize the children and in all contexts of this.
Our next public speaker, Stephen, if you could queue up Courtney. Once again, thank you, Melissa. Courtney, you should be able to speak.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out. I'm Courtney Foster. I live in Auburndale. I am a lifelong Newton Public Schools student. I graduated from Newton South in 2014, and my family has lived in Newton for my entire life. It's great that we have parents and teachers and former students and so many people that have, been personally touched in their lives by Newton Public Schools coming to these meetings. So thanks everyone for coming. I'll start by saying that as a past student and now as an young adult, reflecting on my experiences in school, with my parents, and thinking back to some really difficult and trying moments that took place at our school, in our school system in the last couple of years that I was there. It is a really difficult situation to imagine what parents and teachers and students are going through right now. I know it's always difficult for teachers to figure out what to say and how to respond, and difficult for parents to figure out how they can, send their kids off to school when their kids are feeling apprehensive. I remember my second day of kindergarten was the 9/11 attacks. And in retrospect, my mom saying that made her feel, unsafe sending her kids to school in such an uncertain climate. I'll also say that regarding tensions and cohesiveness between Jewish and Israeli and Arab and Palestinian students, and I'm a half Jewish student, this issue of how to address issues goes back to 10 years, at least in my memory, when I was in school. I remember in our 10th grade history class at Newton South, we were learning about the history of Israel and the history of Palestine. And there was one reading that we were completing from a textbook that talked about the same event. I don't remember which event it was, but there were two passages, and one of them was written by an Israeli and one of them was written by a Palestinian. And part of the exercise was to read both perspectives and obviously to see both perspectives. And I remember at the end of my senior year of high school, somebody's parent actually tried to have the Palestinian perspective reading pulled from the curriculum. And this similarly created a situation where parents and students came together to advocate for all perspectives being represented in the curriculum, and all students, regardless of their background, feeling supported and feeling like their histories are being honored in our curriculum. So it's really striking to me that now 10 years have passed and we're sort of still in the same place as we were then, trying to figure out how students of all identities can be uplifted and respected. I will
Thank you. Next in-person public speaker will be Irene Katz. Apologies.
Hi, everyone. My name is Irene Katz. I live at 19 Rolling Lane, and I have a freshman at Newton North High School. I'm here to comment and express my horror at the grave state of the American education system that has been revealed after the brutal terrorist attack on the Israeli civilians on October 7th. This should not have been a hard call to condemn terror and express sympathy for the victims. However, what we witnessed from our educational institutions is everything from ridiculous equivocations to outright victim blaming, excusing terrorism, and even calls for violence against Jews. Much closer to home at NPS, things were not great either. On October 9th, we received inane statements from school principals about, quote, violence breaking out in the Middle East, end quote, and, quote, we will continue to stand together against acts of hatred and violence, end quote. While the Israeli Jewish community was suffering through the worst collective trauma in our lives, our administration was telling us that they are for all good and against all evil, refusing to take a clear moral stand against murder and terrorism. After backlash from students and parents, some of us were told that there are conflicting opinions on the subject and we don't want people to feel hurt. What conflicting opinions are there on rape, torture, and murder? Who are we afraid to upset? Hamas? Make no mistake, this initial response contributed to Newton's Jewish community's trauma. NPS administration that always seems to be so concerned about, say, microaggressions were initially unable to pull out the worst slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust. Principals eventually sent an amended statement, which I credit Anna Nolan's leadership for. But Superintendent Nolan has her work cut out for her, as we saw that the rot in the system runs very deep. This didn't start 2 weeks ago. This is the symptom of failure across the whole education system. The oppressor versus the oppressed framework of analysis clearly failed to teach how to tell right from wrong and good from evil. In the coming weeks and months, I hope that this district's leadership will be spending time looking inward, trying to figure out what happened with their moral compass when faced with true barbarity, and how they plan to teach our kids critical thinking skills to be able to tell good from evil so that they don't end up in Harvard cheering for sadistic murderers. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene. And we apologize. Apparently, we're having some technical difficulties with the Zoom picking up the public comment audio. So we will try to work that through accordingly.
Stephen, is there anything can you see anything that settings wise that we need to change?
It's sounding fine for me here. I don't know if it's individual. I don't know who's experiencing it, but it's coming through to me.
Okay.
All right. Well, we'll stand by and hopefully that issue is resolved. Our next in-person public comment will be given by Susan Cohen. And just in advance, I'm going to ask if we could please hold applause. I have one more speaker that I can accommodate tonight.
Hi, good evening. My name is Susan Cohen, 124. Hello, my name is Susan Cohen, 124 Mount Vernon Street. Thank you for this opportunity. I would like to yield my time to the three CAT co-chairs, Jamie, Mike, and Kelly.
Okay. Kelly Henderson. I live in Waltham.
Mike Schlegelmelch. I'm an English teacher at North, and I live in Somerville.
Jamie Ellis. I'm the art teacher at Burr School, and I live in Franklin.
Okay, so we are here representing 1,865 of our colleagues, and we would like to read into the record the statement that 1,865 of us agree with. Let me just unclick this giant stack. The Newton Teachers Association demands that the school committee comes to the bargaining table in good faith. The Newton Teachers Association demands a fair contract that includes improved pay for education support professionals, fair cost of living adjustments for all educators, increased mental health supports for all students, equitable parental leave policies that keep up with our neighboring communities, maintenance of time on learning agreements to protect teaching and learning conditions, improved substitute coverage.
We reject the claim that there is not enough money to settle a fair contract with Newton educators. Money is available. $29 million in free or surplus cash, $26 million in an overlay account, and $3 million per year in additional revenues from Eversource.
We further demand that the school committee cease its divisive and misleading messaging that attempts to pit Newton families against educators, such as giving inaccurate negotiations updates to the community and claiming legal work to rule job actions like silent meetings constitute a strike. NTA members are sending you a message loud and clear. It's time to stop the arcane legal maneuvers spearheaded by your lawyer, the misleading and divisive messaging, the cascade of directives that is killing educator morale, and come to the table in bargaining good faith.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Even the last public speaker will be Ayman Ansari. If you could pull her up, that'd be great.
She's coming in now.
Thank you.
Ayman, if you can hold one moment.
Sure.
Ayman, you will be our last public commenter tonight. You may begin. Please state your name and address.
Sure. My name is Iman Ansari. I'm a resident in Newton. I live on 50 Dolphin Road. I've been a resident in Newton for the past 22 years. I come here today as a Palestinian American mother. Israelis were victims of violence on October 7th. Over 1,400 Israelis were killed and 200 kidnapped. That is an enormous tragedy. Palestinians are ongoing victims of violence. Over 1,500 children and over 4,000 Palestinians were killed. That is a tragedy. It is yes and, it's not either or. In May of 2022, we started a dialogue here in Newton about Palestinians to enhance empathy and understanding, dispel stereotypes and stigmas, and bring us closer together as a community on our shared purpose. As Newtonians, we pride ourselves by our humanism, high level of education, and clarity of purpose. And no purpose is more important than ensuring that every person in our city, every single child in our schools feels seen as they are, accepted as they are, loved as they are, supported as they are. Not regardless of where they come from, what God they worship, what gender they are, and what color is their skin, but because of it. All of us, Native American, Asians, Indians, Europeans, Black, Hispanic, Arabs, Palestinians, Jews, Muslims, Christians, Hindu, Buddhists, Baha'is, LGBTQ, and many more. We are all here and we all matter. Frederick Douglass once said, it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. In Newton schools, we can all agree, all of us, that we should build our children up, teach them to be confident, be proud, learn to stand up for what they believe in, no matter what they believe in, as long as they're respectful. No child, no matter what their background is, should be diminished, ridiculed, outcasted, ignored, or made to feel it is best for them to be invisible, that they don't belong in our community. Each morning when I drop my children off, when any Newtonian drops their children off to school, we are trusting that our children will be safe, taken care of, loved, educated until we come back to pick them up. That trust we are putting
30 seconds.
Thank you, is not only in the adults at the schools, teachers and administrators, but also in each other as parents and in the messages and biases we have at home that our children bring with them to school. We are all responsible for the safety of our community and belonging of all of our children. And in this circumstance, I would emphasize the belonging of Jewish children and Palestinian children and anyone that support either side. We are all one side.
Your time is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rahman. Very much appreciated. And thank you to everyone who spoke tonight. The true value of this period reserved for public comment is that we get to listen to each other, that we get to hear each other's perspectives, that we get to seek understanding in each other's concerns. That value holds whether you agree or disagree with what you've heard. With that, we very much appreciate all of you sharing your thoughts and experiences with us. Our public comment period is now closed. I will give us a few minutes for you to file out.
That's from the countryside, I think.
All right, so let's continue on to our consent agenda. Tonight we have up for approval, the approval of draft minutes from the October 11th meeting, approval of grants as detailed in the memo from Amy Meestro, our Director of Business Operations, approval of policy BEDH, public comment, as discussed in detail during, hey Renee, can you close the door for me? Thank you. As discussed in detail during our last school committee meeting, approval of an international field trip to Guadeloupe and Spain as detailed in the memo from Superintendent Nolan. Does anyone wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? Okay, seeing no objection, is there a motion to accept the consent agenda? Sorry, I don't know why I keep looking at you, Rajiv.
I felt the pressure.
All right, good.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Emily. I will look this way on occasion. So we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items. Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3 is absent. Ward 4, yes. Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 8 is absent. Mayor Fuller.
Yes.
All right, the unanimous approval of the items on the consent agenda. Thank you, everyone. Up next, we'll turn to our superintendent update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our update this week sought to encapsulate the ongoing discussions in the district around recent events in Israel. I think our public comment showed you exactly the conversations that we're having with families of all types. And I just want to say, keep reaching out to share perspectives and ideas. We welcome an ongoing dialogue in our attempt to grow together and to be a peaceful community. It is timely information that the school committee approved here tonight, the acceptance of a $50,000 hate crimes prevention grant, which seeks to strengthen our work in ending hate of all types, but does have a specific focus on some anti-Semitism programming that was designed as part of entry planning work this summer, and specifically works with some of our existing programs. The community will have capacity to understand what those programs look like, and we will publish information extensively about that. Speaking about teaching and learning, the entire curriculum leadership team is working under Dr. Renee McCall's leadership on the content for a parent curriculum website that was discussed at our last meeting. Very proud of the initial shell of the site that I saw at a recent meeting. We also continue to adapt the new literacy curriculum in grades 1 and 2 and some select staff in grades 3, 4, and 5. As with any new curriculum adoption, we'll work through materials and texts and try out new unit materials with students. Our instructional leadership literacy team, led by Assistant Superintendent McCall and Farag, are beginning coordinated walkthroughs with our literacy consultants who are working to help ensure a smooth implementation of the new curriculum. But walkthroughs with principals led by district leaders help to ensure both smooth implementation of the curriculum, but also alignment and calibration for better support of strong teaching and learning in the district. So I thank them for that. High school term 1 progress reports are 2 weeks in the rear window, meaning that we're nearing the end of term reporting. Elementary parent conferences open this week, and progress reports for middle schools are forthcoming. A highlight of the past week was our first ever mental health summit, held and sponsored by the Office of Student Services under Assistant Superintendent Casey Noe Miller. All mental health providers in Newton schools were invited, and over 100 staff members participated. The aim of this summit was to come together as a group, build community, and to hear from professionals in the field. In future summits, we hope that there will be additional professional workshops, interaction between staff, and topics driven by staff interest. We did hear from Dr. Gary Bailey, Director of Simmons University Community Engagement and Social Justice Center, and Michelle Muffet-Lipinski, Principal and Founder of the North Shore Recovery High School, whose work has been documented in the MTV documentary 16 and Recovering. It's a very powerful session. Digital Citizenship Week was last week, and we are one of those districts that is very fortunate to have a strong leadership in our Director of Technology, Steve Vertendi, who is the man behind the Zooms at these meetings. But he is also a former teacher who is also a technology person and helps to lead the instructional technology integration for the district. Digital Citizenship Week is a time where students focus more directly on integrating social media lessons and digital citizenship skills and media literacy. And if you're interested in seeing the realm of and range of possibilities these practitioners provide, we have provided a menu of services that this instructional component of our staff provides every day in all of our schools. Also, under the Director of Technology's leadership, we are experiencing a cybersecurity training for all staff. This is done during contract time. There have been a lot of stories nationally and in the state and region about school districts that are targeted by hackers who get own data that they get from districts and then hold it hostage. Cybersecurity incidents impact time, learning, and dollars. And so these trainings happen periodically throughout the year, 4 sessions for every staff person to teach them more safety. It also has wonderful implications for personal cyber safety. And then finally, just to share that the fall menu of professional learning offerings for Newton Public Schools staff has been listed. They're focused under focus areas for the district, which are guided by the district priorities and improvement plans. And they are available for educators to meet their relicensure requirement. They are free to Unit A and B educators who are seeking these professional development recertification points. And some courses have an option of graduate credit at an out-of-pocket expense, but that the district then reimburses staff per contract through human resources. The next menu of courses and course offerings will be out in January, and I'll tell you about them then. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Any questions for Anna regarding something she shared in her update? Yeah. Great. I think you've got another answer or not.
So move another thing, right? So our second agenda item tonight is just the formal kickoff of something I've been talking about since May of last year when we started to come together and knowing each other. And that is the launching of a profile or a portrait of a Newton graduate process. This was something that the school committee and the interim superintendent last year were discussing, and is something that most districts in the Commonwealth and even nationally are using as a sort of collective vision, a vision to galvanize around for a community's aspirations for their students. This process is designed to engage community stakeholders, both internal to the school system, students, and prioritize student voice, and community members outside of the school system, including business and religious leaders. This does not imply that there is no strong vision for the Newton Public Schools now. What it means is that we take a snapshot in time to re-energize ourselves and repoint ourselves for now, post-pandemic Newton, a time where all of us are looking for hope and vision and the next steps for our young people. So I'm really excited to get this started in the wintertime. We are talking about this tonight because we're looking for people to volunteer to participate on this exciting committee. There can be upwards of 300 individuals, both internal to the school, students, and external to the community involved in this process. And Steve, I don't know if you could advance forward a couple slides. One more. These are the, that's fine, you can stop there. The team members and timeline are detailed here. We're looking to put together the portrait or profile design team, and districts get to decide what they call it once the whole group is in it. But we're looking for people from all walks of Newton life, and that would be the next slide, Steve, which includes faith communities, business leaders, representatives from higher education, community members, social service agency partners, students, teachers, families, and of course, district and school leaders to join us in a process where we talk about this vision for the future of Newton. If you could advance the slide, Steve. Should you choose this adventure with us in 4 meetings in January in the evening, we will give you some good snacks, but we will give you something to nourish you and to nourish the community. The 4 sessions are session 1, we talk about how has the world changed And how does education need to adapt to it? Public education needs to adapt to an unknown future. And this is a session where we talk about all the potential future adaptations our students will need to make in their lifetime. And what does that mean for a school system? The second session talks about what the community thinks are essential skills and mindsets that are necessary in order to plan for the tomorrow of our Newton graduates. The third session is where, after a discussion and prioritizing and ranking of competencies developed by the design committee, we pull the larger community and ask them to also prioritize these competencies. And therein, we develop a shared vision for graduates of our city. That culminates into a portrait of a graduate, which is really just the beginning of the work of the city and the schools. Here are some samples of other districts' profile and portraits of a graduate, different competencies depending on the community of what they would like to highlight in terms of focal areas for study, for funding, for professional development, and for hiring. When I've gone through this process previously, it then led to a conversation about what do we want in terms of teachers in the district. So what would the profile of a Newton teacher look like? And what would the profile of a Newton parent or Newton community engagement look like? So this kicks off a real, hopefully an alignment of values, a coalescing of support around key student competency areas. And it will provide our district clarity and an intensity on topic areas, which will allow us to align training, hiring, budget, and the development of future strategic plans. So if you'd like to get involved in the materials this evening, there are community member interest forms, there's staff member interest forms, and a district webpage with all the profile portrait of a graduate information listed there. And you certainly can reach out to anyone in our office, and we're happy to talk to you about the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Questions from the members or student member? Go ahead, Rajiv.
Anna, are you thinking of bringing in professional facilitation or a group to move the process forward?
Yes, we've contracted with Battelle for Kids. This is their specialty. They take districts through profile of a graduate processes.
All set? Great. So I have a question of my own, and I'm wondering, with concerted activity being something that we're very familiar with in this contract negotiations year, how concerned are you that you'll be able to get a level of staff interest in this year while we're negotiating as you would, say, in any other year?
It's a key worry, a deep worry. We have discussed and will discuss with our principals that should we not be able to do this in a volunteer capacity, would we turn to staff meetings? Although, as you know, in terms of staff meetings, there has also been the expectation that a protected work to rule scenario is active participation within those meetings. So we would just have to assess at that time what could happen. However, we did ask the facilitator that today, and he told us about Fresno, California, that's in the exact same situation. And in that regard, they canvassed all the other community members and then brought it to the teachers after the conclusion of the contract negotiations and saw it as an avenue for healing and reconnection. Where are you in terms of these values, and then shaping it again with our educators in the room. If we have to do that, we will.
Well, I hope we can get that level of participation, as we know our educator voices is key. It's incredibly important.
It is. It's central.
Yes. All right. Any other questions on this portion of the update? Okay. Thank you, Anna. So our first item, continuing on to our action items and discussion updates. The first item here is a negotiations update. And for this particular update, the negotiations subcommittee requested that the superintendent and her team, including our communications director, put together a packet of information for us to utilize for this update and as a tool for our community to understand our current negotiations. So Kathy Shields, our negotiations co-chair, will walk us through tonight. And Stephen, you should have a document you can pull up for Kathy. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. So as Tamika said, the collective bargaining team asked Anna and her administrative team to pull together some data that we thought it was important to share with you and the community. These materials, these written materials, will be posted as part of our meeting minutes for this evening. But some of this information we have shared with you in prior negotiations updates. Some of it is the same information, but in a different format, and some of it is information we haven't shared previously. So just I'm gonna walk through some of the data that we have here. The first 2 pages relate to 2 of the larger units within the NTA. So as we've talked about before, the NTA has 5 different units. Unit A are largely classroom teachers. Unit C are largely our paraprofessionals, our teaching assistants, our behavior therapists, and others. So this first page relates or focuses mostly on our Unit A employees, basically our classroom teachers. And it explains that the components of those employees' salaries sort of break down into 3 categories. They break down into steps, which are based on years of experience, lanes, which are based on levels of educational achievement, and a COLA, which is an annual increase. So in terms of steps, most of our Unit A members step once a year. The average step increase for those Unit A members who are getting step increases is about 4.2%, and about half of our Unit A members receive those step increases. There are 14 steps, which means it takes about 14 years to progress through that stage. For lanes changes are for staff members who attain additional educational experience. So either an additional degree or additional graduate credits. And the average increase for changing lanes is over 5%. In addition, there are COLAs, which are cost of living increases that are on top of both step and lanes. So in this current fiscal year, for employees who are stepping, in other words, getting those 4.2% step increases, they are additionally getting a COLA of 2.625%. For employees on the top step, they got a COLA of 3% in this fiscal year. So once you have finished the 14-year stepping part of the contract, educators who stay with us longer than that are eligible for what are called longevity payments according to the contract. And we've broken down for you the longevity payments that each of those educators receive, and they receive those every year. And so for years beyond year 20, that is in general for most educators more than an additional 1% of what their salary would be. So if you go to page 2, this data is similar, but relates to Unit C, who are our paraprofessionals, our education support professionals. And those Unit C members break down into 2 categories. So there are Category 1 Unit C members who are primarily teaching assistants. They are people who help in the classroom, who are general building assistants. And then there are Category 2 positions, generally those who have some sort of additional qualifications, licensure, certifications, et cetera, such as our medical assistants, our behavior therapists, and our SEL assistants. Like our Unit A members, there are 3 components of Unit C members' salary. There is their hourly rate, there are step increases for years of service, and there's a COLA. So the hourly rate for Unit C employees, so Unit C employees are hourly workers under state law, and they're paid an hourly wage based on the number of hours they work per week. And the number of hours that Unit C members work per week vary by level because the time of our school day at each level differs. So in general, there is a different number of hours that we need from most Unit C employees, whether they work in elementary school, middle school, or high school. So in addition to the actual school day hours, Unit C members, or most Unit C members, are paid for some time both before and after school, and some time to participate in professional development activities.
With respect to stepping Unit C members, those who are getting step increases, the average step increase for Unit C members is higher than for Unit A members. So the average step increase is about 6.2%. And there are fewer steps generally in the Unit C salary scale. Depending on what category you're in, it's either 12 steps or 9 steps. The COLAs for fiscal year 23, our current fiscal year, were the same for Unit A and Unit C members. And Unit C members, like Unit A members, are entitled to longevity payments once they are no longer receiving those annual step increases. So the next page of this presentation summarizes some of the benefits that are available to all of our NPS employees. Unlike being in the private sector, our NPS employees are eligible for pensions when they retire from the Newton Public Schools. They are also entitled to other monetary compensation benefits upon their retirement, some of which are listed here. In terms of healthcare coverage benefits, Newton Public Schools, like the city of Newton generally, provides healthcare coverage through Blue Cross Blue Shield. Some of the other districts to which Newton has been compared in terms of salary and other benefits are part of what's called the GIC, which is a state-provided health insurance group that in general would be less expensive for the city, but in general more expensive for employees who are getting their healthcare coverage through the GIC. The plans available for Newton employees include both an HMO plan and a PPO plan, and Newton employees contribute between 20 and 25% for the cost of their HMO plans. The district pays the remainder, and a slightly higher percentage, 30 to 35%, for the PPO plans. I think it's important to remember that staff working at NPS don't work sort of the work year that many of us who work in the private sector or otherwise in the public sector work. Our Unit A salaries are based on a 185-day, 10-month work year. And in addition to working the 185 days, teachers receive time off for a number of holidays. They also receive 6 personal days and 15 sick days. Unit C members similarly work 185 days a year. Their hours correspond to the school day at each grade level, and they also receive paid time off. In addition to those benefits, our employees are eligible for parental leave. If they do not otherwise live in Newton, staff are able to send their children to the Newton Public Schools at no charge on a space available basis. And there are other benefits described in this slide. So the next couple of pages provide some additional detail comparing the salaries that Newton pays to salaries in some of our surrounding towns. Some of the data that's been discussed publicly recently compares Newton's salaries to the average salaries in other towns. We wanted to sort of provide an explanation of why that is not an accurate comparison, and that's not the data we should be using when we talk about comparing Newton's salaries and financial packages to those of other towns. And that's because when you look at average numbers as reported by DESE, what you are losing in that analysis is that each district has a different combination of employees at different levels of experience. So for instance, if you have an older teacher population, your average salary numbers will be higher, even if when you look apples to apples in terms of an employee's years of experience, another district is paying higher. And so that's the case. So we've chosen just 3 of our comparable districts here to illustrate this difference. So if you look at the chart on the top of the page, you will see that Newton's step step scale, when you compare apples to apples, that we have higher salaries than Belmont, Needham, and Bedford. But when you look at average salaries, we are not the highest because our teaching population happens to be, in general, younger than the teaching populations in those other towns. And so what we've provided on the next page is a comparison of our Unit C salaries to the Unit C salaries in many other of our surrounding towns. And we also have this larger volume of information for the Unit A salaries. We've provided that in a couple of past presentations, so we haven't included it again here. But what I think it's important to reflect on when you look at the Unit C salary comparisons, when you're looking at bottom steps and top steps, is that while Newton is not at the top in terms of bottom steps, we're sort of roughly in the middle there. We are substantially ahead. And I mean more than $10 an hour ahead when you get to the top of our Unit C pay scales. We are paying our Unit C members far more than all of our comparative districts. And I think it's important for all of us in looking at our bottom step scales in trying to make some changes to pay those employees more. And that's part of what we're doing is in these current contract negotiations. So I think the last point I wanted to make is on the last of the slides. And that is that we are working within a fiscal reality. We are working within the reality that we are expecting a 3.5% increase in our allocation over the next 3 years. And to do that, that means that the cost increases that we expect to have available to us over the next 3 years is about $21 million. It's important to contrast that to the overall proposals requested by the NTA, which would cost nearly double the money that the school district has available to it. Those NTA requests come in price tag wise at about $57 million and would require an annual increase in the NPS budget of 6% as opposed to about 3.5%. And we've provided you with some details on the individual cost breakdowns of some of the various NTA proposals. So with that, I'll stop and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kathy. Questions from the members?
Anything you wanted to add, Anna?
Go ahead, Anna.
Sure. I just wanted to say, the last page of this is really what I need the community to understand as your school leader. As a longtime teacher and a public school leader, I'm proud of the contract benefits that currently exist in the Newton Public Schools and that we're able to provide our teachers and paraprofessionals. But the needs as currently constructed and are emerging in my entry plan, along with the asks that we are trying to accommodate in negotiations, are larger than the allocation that has been set before us. And my job as superintendent is to bring forward all the needs and the reality of where we are in terms of where needs meet fiscal resources. And we must consider costs and the amount of money that is available to us when we're thinking about the future and what is needed to settle this contract in a sustainable and fair way, without losing ground on the experience and achievement for our young people and stewardship of our assets. And this fiscal reality that is presented here does not enable any program improvements or new materials or restoration of any cuts that have been made in prior years. So I do feel that it's important for us to understand the fiscal landscape as we're coming into the conversations for now and the future. Of course, there are additional funds that have come up in conversation recently, and I know we're going to have some conversations about that as a committee, and I welcome that conversation.
Thank you, Anna. Richie, did I see you asking? Okay. I think one thing I just want to kind of highlight or elevate, talk a little bit about the, I don't have page numbers, the chart with Unit C. for me, Kathy?
Sure.
The Unit C bottom step. How would you describe a bottom step?
So the bottom step is for basically an entry level employee.
So the Unit C bottom step is the entry level rate. And is this chart essentially highlighting that while our bottom or our entry level rate for our Unit C is somewhere in the middle of this list, we accelerate quickly?
We do. So our Unit C, on one of the earlier slides, we talked about how many steps there are in our Unit C salary scale. And I think what it's important, so there are, for Category 1 Unit C members, there are 12 steps. And for Category 2 Unit C members, there are 9 steps. And each of those steps on an annual basis is about 6.2%. So while our Category 1 entry level step may be sort of middle of the pack, if you advance 1 year, in addition to any COLA that you would receive a 6.2% step increase. And I think it is both the number of steps we have and the size of the steps that sort of propel us to the sort of far above market rate on our top step. I guess what I'd add is that one of the things we've been discussing as part of the negotiations of the contract is dropping at least one and perhaps more steps off of the bottom of our salary scale, because that's a value to our employees. It's something the school committee values also, to be increasing wages for Unit C members who are some of our lower paid employees. And so that is already something that the parties have been discussing.
Thank you. Thought it was important to highlight that. And another point, speaking of values to our employees, you mentioned the benefit to the employees of who don't reside in Newton, of having staff children attend Newton Public Schools. Do you have some idea or some sense of the dollar value of that attendance?
Well, it's hard to put a dollar value on that. I think the closest I could come to putting a dollar value on it is if you look at our DESE per pupil expenditures, which are over $20,000 a student.
So it'd be fair to say that the benefit of attendance in the Newton Public Schools is equivalent to approximately $20,000 as determined by
I think that
DESE.
is one way you could look at it.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Others? Go ahead, Mayor Fuller.
Just like to chime in a couple of things. Just want to clarify one sentence on the last page. The second sentence currently reads, the operational override failed last spring, which means there is no planned increase to the district allocation in the coming fiscal years. I just want to make sure everybody understands there is a planned increase of 3.5% each year. And somebody could misread that sentence, that there's no planned increase at all. I just want to remind folks that in Newton, 84% of our tax base is from property taxes. We live in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Prop 2.5 means we cannot increase property taxes as a whole more than 2.5% unless our voters vote yes on an operational override. And I was way out there out in front asking our voters to do just that in March. Many of you joined me. I know the Newton Teachers Association joined me as well, but that did not pass. So we're capped at a 2.5% increase for almost all our revenues. In addition, we get some new growth when there's new development. As you look at the economic conditions in Newton right now, because of really high interest rates and an uncertain economy and high construction costs, things are really stalling out. So we provided financial forecasts recently, just in the last month or so, that shows a 3.5% increase in our revenues, and that flows right through to the Newton Public Schools. I will continue to look for ways to increase revenues, and I think maybe in a little bit from now, we're going to talk more about that. But I just want to clarify that so nobody got mixed up accidentally.
Appreciate the clarification. And thank you very much, Kathy. A really excellent review of this document. And Anna, you and your team did a really wonderful job of putting it all together. It looks great. It has a lot of comprehensive information, very easy to read and digest. And I think it'll serve us well throughout the remainder of our negotiations. Okay, so we will now turn to our preliminary enrollment report, and we will be joined by Katie Hogue, our Chief of Data and Research. Hi, Katie. Good to see you in person tonight.
I know. It's nice to see everyone in person. Sorry.
So if I may, Madam Chair, we had a wonderful question from you actually before this about, so why, Dr. Hogue, do we do this little teaser of enrollment and then do a full enrollment report later?
All right, great. So I'll start off with that, and then I'll talk about some key points from the memo, and then I'm happy to take questions. So we provide a preliminary enrollment report every year that says enrollment's not 100% verified in many places, because we won't come back to talk about enrollment until February of this year. So that's pretty late in the school year. We have been providing the preliminary enrollment in early October since before I have been here. So it's been many years. And it helps provide context for the upcoming budget discussions, but also so that people have a sense of what enrollment looks like this year compared to both last year's enrollment. So changes at grade levels in particular schools, as well as the comparison to what we were projecting last year. It also is helpful for us internally to start thinking about the projections for the upcoming year and any shifts we would make to our methodology based on trends that we're seeing. So is there anything else you want to add? No? Okay. So that's why I'm here. And I'll just note also the reason that we say it's preliminary is that we're still cleaning up the October 1 enrollment for our DESE state reporting, which is due at the end of this week. So it's pretty close to what the final enrollment will be. There's just some students that high schools may still be following up with. So there might be a shift plus or minus in, a couple students from what's reported in this memo for the final. So just some highlights from the memo. Our preliminary enrollment this year is 11,600 students. That's a decrease of 117 students from last year, and it's 29 students below what we projected for this year. So I just want to mention we were projecting a decline in enrollment this year of negative 0.8%. Our actual decline is slightly larger at negative 0.9% compared to last year. Our variance from our projection of 11,629 students is negative 0.2%. So that's pretty in line with what we typically see for our projections, with the exception of COVID and then the year after. At the elementary level, we saw a decline of 71 students from last year, and we were 40 students below projection for negative 0.8% variance at the elementary level. This was mainly due to a smaller than projected first grade, with the bulk of that under projection in grade 1 at Burr and Cabot. In middle school, we declined 99 students from last year, but we're 41 students over projection. So that's positive 1.6% variance at the middle school level. And this is mainly due to an increased or larger than projected grade 6 class at Bigelow and at Brown. And I just want to mention at Bigelow, as you remember, we made some changes to the feeder patterns from the middle schools that went into place this fall. Those were incorporated into the projections, and the number of students from Cabot who fed to Bigelow is what we projected, right around the same amount. The increase, or the larger than projected sixth grade at Bigelow, is really due to some changes in what we typically see in the patterns. So we saw fewer than typical withdrawals to private school from the schools that feed to Bigelow. And we saw increases in the number of students enrolling into Bigelow from outside of Newton. So there were some changes in our typical patterns there. And then at the high school level, we saw an increase of 53 students from last year, but we were 30 students under our projection for a variance of negative 0.7% at the high school. And so then this variance from projection happened at both schools. At Newton North, we had lower than projected grades 11 and 12. And at South, we had a lower than projected 10th grade class. And then finally, the difference between both of our high schools this year is 274 students, which is stable with what we've seen post-COVID. So I'm happy to take any questions now.
Great. Thank you so much. Questions from the members? Go ahead, Kathy.
Katie, can you just talk a little bit about how you use this data on an ongoing basis?
Sure. So we are looking at enrollment starting in the spring when people start registering students for the upcoming school year with kindergarten registration and then other students that are coming in as new students. And we track it throughout the summer. So every week we're looking at enrollments that have been completed and that are still pending so that we have a sense of where we may need to make staffing adjustments for classrooms. And then now it actually feeds into our projection methodology for the enrollment analysis report that we'll do in February to do the next 5 years of projection. Anything?
Maybe just so the public understands, can you add just a little bit on over the summer, how, if at all, you've made staffing decisions based on this data?
Sure. So that is not actually me. Right.
How the information you provide feeds into staffing decisions that get made district.
You want to take
So we will be looking at that all spring, obviously, all year, actually. So if there are blips or changes that occur, so for example, we're coming to you shortly with a memo of things that have happened since you closed the budget in the spring, and we have now fully enrolled this group in the fall. So Aisha and we have like a good, hot, sweaty discussion about like which place needs more of this and who needs another teacher for that. And so you will actually receive a memo for your knowledge, both for special education, mandatory additions, and also any enrollment shifts that we have had to make. I think that's different than you have experienced in the past, but I'm old school that way. So you're going to see it and you're going to vote it because anytime we make significant additions outside of the budget, I want you to know it.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. So, excuse me, no worries. So what I heard was that we have both an internal and an external use for doing the preliminary enrollment report. The internal use is some of the topics that we just talked about, as well as helping the school committee and the community over writ large understand some of the budgetary decisions that are going to be coming throughout the course of the year. And then the external use is that I think you said that there was a report due to DESE at the end of this week.
That's correct. Excuse me, water went down.
No worries.
We have to report student enrollment data to the state 3 times a year. So we do it as of October 1st, March 1st, and then end of year.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. Mayor Fuller, go ahead.
Can you try to put this in perspective, just what you're hearing from fellow like-minded or like districts, what they're experiencing this year? We had the big drop during the pandemic year, but how does 117 decrease compare more generally in the last 5 years if you set aside that one big drop? Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, so we do include that information in the enrollment analysis report. So we haven't pulled it together yet for other districts because they haven't reported their enrollment for October 1 yet. So we can't see that public information. We will have that in February. Other districts have seen similar declines. And we also will have the demographer's report again in February, and he can provide some really helpful context in what he's seeing across the country, as well as other districts in Massachusetts that he's working with.
You okay?
I'm sorry. Yes. I feel like
We've all been there. Take a second to properly clear out.
Thank you.
Rajiv, go ahead.
Katie, just a quick comment. Nice job on getting really, really accurate with the predictions, right? For a district our size, being within 1% or so is pretty good, even though I know it's peanut buttered across a lot of schools. But this is really helpful, and I know you're always refining the methodology, but we seem to have been pretty accurate on this one. So thank you.
Thank you. That's like getting an A right there.
Wow. Rajiv, did you say peanut buttered?
That's the technical term.
Oh. I've heard that one. Thank you. Any other questions for Katie? Chris, did you have one?
Yeah, just
Go ahead.
one quick one. Just in looking at the projection or the enrollment versus projections, Ward was the far and away outlier. Is there any sort of underlying theme there that we have to work from?
Sure. So Ward's projection for kindergarten was much smaller for this fall than what we actually saw. A large part of that was due to the very small kindergarten that we had at Ward last year, which was included in our projection methodology. We have been pretty accurate at projecting kindergarten as a whole across the district in terms of the total number. We're much less accurate at kindergarten by school. A large reason for that is we don't have very good information on where students live. So to project kindergarten, and I'll talk about this in more detail in February, we use the birth to K ratios that we've seen in recent years. So we're looking at the number of births to Newton residents and then how many students enroll in kindergarten 5 years later. That has been pretty accurate, but we don't know where those kids reside in Newton. We don't have very good census data either on incoming students from the yearly census. It appears many families just don't put their children on the census. So the parents are showing up, but not the students. So we used to use that as a source for kindergarten projections, but we can't anymore. We have a few other data sources that we're going to be looking at this year to try to improve the school by school kindergarten projections. One of them is we're collecting sibling information in Registration Gateway. When families register their children, we ask for sibling information, both in the schools and younger students, and that would give us address and districted schools. So we're looking at ways to improve that, but it would be wonderful if it was included in the census data. That would be really helpful for us to then distribute the overall projection across the schools.
Okay. And part of the reason I was asking was, Ward is also the massive outlier when it comes to percentage of kids who attend private school of the eligible public school population. And I was just wondering if there's any indication that there was just a different shift of the incoming kindergarten class of that proportion of kids who are attending NPS versus private schools, or too soon to say?
It's too soon. That's a good question. In January, we'll be doing the school attending children, the census, the private school census. And so then we would have a sense of the kindergarten aged students in Ward who are attending private schools. We don't know who they are right now. So it's hard to know if it was a shift, more families choosing to go to Ward, or if it's just a larger cohort of kids.
Okay.
So more to come.
Great. Thank you.
The others. Okay. Go ahead, Kathy.
Can I just
Final word.
sort of totally non-scientific comment? Having been a Ward parent for the last 11 years or so, it's my sense at least that this year's kindergarten is far more back to where Ward was traditionally. And I do think last year's kindergarten was sort of abnormally small. And I think that happens sometimes, but it's my sense, at least from an overall perspective, that this year's kindergarten class looks more like kindergarten classes of the past. My non-scientific view.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy. And before Kathy, thank you, Chris. And thank you, Katie. We very much appreciate this report, preliminary though it is, and we look forward to hearing from you on this topic again in February.
Great. Thank you.
All right, let's continue on. Our next item on our agenda is Superintendent Nolan leading us in a discussion about how her entry planning is impacted by enrollment and budgetary considerations.
So thank you, Madam Chair. You heard from Dr. Hoag that the second part of this a more in-depth analysis is coming to you in February, but I've asked her to also bring to you on the 6th the high school class sizes, middle school class sizes, and the elementary arrays analysis. She will not be doing a deep dive analysis of that for you, but it is there to inform this moment in time. So not unlike the budget discussion I just said to you around negotiations and what's on our radar, I need you to know that in terms of entry planning, some significant themes are coming up about concern over math and science achievement in the district. And then I have to point out to you that our class sizes at the high school in math and science are 27 to 30 students on the average, and in lab classes as well. So I use that just as one example because I know there's resonance around teachers wanting smaller classes, students wanting smaller classes, and parents wanting smaller classes. And for all the reasons that this district prioritizes belonging and connection and support, as well as achievement, I point that out because it really has to be in our thinking about what's next for the district fiscally. I would also say to you that the NTA's desire for social workers, I know you want that too. We want full-time social workers for our elementary classes, but they're not full-time in all those places. And so the caseload for individual social workers is quite high then across more than one facility. So I want to point that out to you because we are in this pivotal moment of making decisions around what is next for our finances and for how to move forward with negotiations. And I'm just starting to see real thematic needs that are occurring. And you'll hear me showing in that report just a few weeks down the road of concern over resources to intervene when we identify that students need help at the elementary level and giving teachers the coordinated time to do that planning. Elementary teachers have like 7 preps to do, different things they have to prepare in a school day, and they need adequate time to do that. And I'll explain this to you later. But the way you do that is to create a rotation of special area classes that allows students to rotate through both enrichment activities and intervention activities. And we, in some places, share staff across more than one building. So it's almost impossible to schedule all of the things that you want for your young people in Newton. And so I set the table with that because I want to be real clear. My job is to advocate for the absolute best programming, supports, and interventions for the young people of Newton. And I'm going to do that. And I know that we live in an ecosystem of the city, and we have to be able to fit within that. So we are at a real crossroads here as we come upon this moment of who do we want to be, profile of a graduate, and addressing the things that we have given up, and what do we need to do to settle this contract. And so I just wanted to put all of that before us because they are budgetary considerations as we move through these next crucial weeks.
Thanks, Anna. So I guess it would behoove us as a committee to seek some type of guidance from you about the priorities and the needs of the district that you are seeing. And so go ahead.
Well, at the risk of overstepping my role, I would like to say that we have seen that the allocation that we are dealing with related to completely addressing all contractual needs and upcoming program improvements is not sufficient at this time. So I would like to encourage the committee to encourage us to think about how to ask for additional funding in a way, though, that is sustainable and does not create cliffs 3 years from now or 2 years from now that we are then in a mode of unbuilding all the things we built back in the contracts. And I have to say to you, as I've done the entry plan work, morale is very low, particularly around staff who are lower in age and years in the district. I should say years in the district, because they are more susceptible to budget cuts, or staff in the arts, or something that is perceived as sort of less core to graduating students. I don't see it as less core, but those staff are very concerned. You know, I met with a group of students at South High School who said, you know, my theater teacher has been on the budgetary block for several years now, meaning not sure that she's going to come back at the full FTE that she needs to be able to have a full-time job. And so it gets in the way of their connecting with her, it gets in the way of long-term planning. And that's just a terrible place to be if we're professionals. And I think we have to look at some creative alternatives that do not put us in a long range funding death spiral, but that expand what we're able to do this year.
Go ahead, Mayor Fuller.
I just want to lift up what the superintendent said. I couldn't agree with her more. It's been clear to me that the Newton Public Schools, our students, even with the enrollment declines, we just heard Katie Hogue talk about, yep, we're down another 100 plus this year. But what the superintendent is seeing with fresh eyes, but lots of years of experience, fresh eyes in Newton, but bringing a lot of know-how and skill and experience. Our students need support in so many ways, particularly in this post-pandemic world. And I think it is our job to find the funding that we can. I believe in the Newton Public Schools. I believe the most important service that we provide as a city government is the Newton Public Schools. A week ago, I'm disappointed that I couldn't convince the city council to boost on the sustainable method the funding for NPS for the coming years. I would encourage the superintendent, her team, the school committee to keep articulating all the reasons why this is a time of challenge for our students, and our teachers are the heart and soul of our schools. It makes complete sense that they're essentially 90% of the budget. We have to support our teachers at this time. And so anything that we can bring forward to our fellow elected officials in the city council in a sustainable, predictable way to support ongoing operations. It is great to use one-time funds for one-time needs. And yep, we got a whole bunch of one-time needs. But I would say even more important are ongoing operations and transforming one-time funds into ongoing support. There is a way to do it. I'm open for other ways of doing it. I'm open to any and all ideas for how to support this fabulous school system.
Thank you, Mayor Fuller. So Emily reminded me, Paul, I see you've got your hands raised, so I'll get there in just a sec. Emily reminded me a couple meetings ago or a couple weeks ago, time is relative, that the school committee is approaching the time for us to start working on our budget guidelines, a process that she and Paul spearheaded for the first in a while time last year. So it would make sense that as we're looking at one-time funding and being able to, I don't know, turn those one-time funding into help with our ongoing needs, to put together a list and insert those into our budget guidelines process for the school committee to be able to give the superintendent and her team some concrete direction as to where we would like to head in that process. Just a thought. Paul, go ahead and see if you can pull it forward a little bit more from there.
Thanks, Tamika. It seems to me we have a healthy confluence of people and interests right now. The mayor has elegantly stated her commitment to the schools and the children and the teachers, and happens to have some surplus funds available through the overlay and other mechanisms right now. And as she also mentioned, we have a new superintendent who's offering us a very rigorous and long-awaited assessment of where we actually stand in terms of curriculum development, in terms of curriculum improvement, and what's going on in the classrooms of the different kinds. It seems to me, and this is admittedly a political judgment, but it seems to me if Anna and her folks can work closely with the mayor and her folks and put together that kind of sustainable, thoughtful package of funding, and if we can be united on that, that my impression, talking to a number of city councilors, is that they would welcome that. In fact, I think some of them are waiting for it. I know, Mayor Fuller, that use of those funds requires, I think, a supermajority of the city council to approve them. I'd be pretty optimistic that if we, the school committee and the superintendent and the mayor and her folks, have a unified view of what would be most beneficial to our students and our teachers, that we'll be able to deliver the goods for the city council in a way that helps them want to support us. So I'm actually pretty excited and optimistic at this moment, notwithstanding the full set of needs that Anna already started to lay out. It just seems to me, as I said, we have a confluence of ideas and of people and resources that we can bring to bear. So I'm all for it.
Great.
Thanks.
Chris? No? Go ahead, Chris.
Sure. So I guess I'm hearing a couple things. There is a little bit of a vacuum right now in the sense of the mayor's plans for those funds, which it was not an irrational plan, but one the city council did not agree to, did not pass, and now everyone knows there's this big pile of money sitting there, so to speak. And I'm pretty sure there's, different priorities and groups in Newton who have that money spent 5 times over. That's the way it works. I'm kind of hearing from you, Tamika, that, we should move forward with a budget guidelines process. I'm kind of hearing from Paul, we should have the administration working with the city to figure out what's possible and how to move forward. And I think we just need to put a plan in place. Mm-hmm. I think what Paul is saying is right, that there are absolutely city councilors who are looking at us going like, hey guys, what do you want? What's the ask? So I think what we really need to do tonight is put a concrete plan in place to say, how are we going to arrive at this? Is it going to be pulled from the school committee? Is it going to be pushed from the superintendent? And what the time frame is and how we're going to move forward. That's what I would like to see us do. I would personally say, I think given this is an organization that's been, run with the same management, so to speak, for 12 years or something like that, anytime a fresh set of eyes comes in, there's always going to be changes. There's always going to, and some of those are going to be things we need to add. And, Superintendent Nolan just mentioned, thinking about our math and science at the high school level, I'm sure there's efficiencies to be gained as well. So, what would make sense to me is to see that fresh set of eyes come forward and say, here are the one-time things that we think we really need. And, you know, I know we've had this discussion several times on some things that seem quite obvious, and probably not, huge in the scope of things. But then, you know, what are those ongoing operational needs as well? What are the efficiencies? And then how do we move forward? I mean, we need to put something together and have it out there. So I would urge us to not sit on this any longer and to move forward.
Thank you, Chris. And I think you'll have wide agreement with what you've just said about the urgency of the need to get moving on this for the reasons you detailed. Anna, if we're looking at our school committee calendar, how feasible is it to pull together this list of one-time spending priorities and just student need priorities by our next school committee meeting on November 6th?
Absolutely feasible.
Right. So I think we have a time frame. Let me finish the thought. The time frame of coming back to the school committee with a list from Paul. What I'm hearing is that Anna, you and the mayor can certainly be talking and working closely together to make sure that list is feasible and really good projects that we can all feel move forward the district and that are needed, and that we, the school committee, would have a part of that process by assenting to the list, if you will, and then presenting that list in a unified manner to the city council, who would then be the ones that we would look to approve this stream of funds as we've detailed in terms of our priorities and needs. Paul, have I captured what you have
Exactly.
said?
Exactly right, Tamika. And you said quickly a key point, and I just want to reiterate it in case I didn't before. This has to be a joint venture of us and the mayor and her folks. And the mayor sits in two seats here. One is a member of our committee, but also as the chief executive of the city. And she has to balance what we're asking with the other important needs facing her in the city. But I think it's very important for the public and for the city council to know that whatever we come up with is a joint product that we both feel not only comfortable with, but excited about, and that we think will make a substantive difference for our children and teachers.
Absolutely. So we are elevating the point, which is ideally at the end of the day, we will have a unified package to present to the city council for approval.
Right.
Richie, you wanted to say something. Go ahead.
Just one clarification, I think, based on the idea that sometimes one-time funds can be converted into a stream of ongoing funding. Right? So in terms of our request to Anna, it would be helpful to understand what priorities might be for additional ongoing funding, operational funding. So increasing class sizes, bringing back kindergarten aides, all of those things would not be one-time expenditures, but are among many critical areas that we unfortunately had to impact over the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it would be helpful to understand both. There are certainly one-time projects and expenditures that will help our students and teachers. There are others where thinking creatively about creating ongoing streams of funding could also be really beneficial. So I know it's additional effort, but getting some sense of both would be very helpful.
Roger. Great. Thank you, Rajiv. Others? Okay, so returning to this topic, we will depend on Anna and her team to put together a list of priorities for the school committee to consider, and the mayor. I forgot about that piece. It's essential piece of it. to come back to the school committee during our November 6th meeting, after which we will review, we will talk. And the reason I brought in the budget guidelines process is because we do have that process already developed, and I don't want it to stagnate. Emily and Paul, you worked hard to reassert that as something that this school committee should be doing on a yearly basis. And I think we can integrate this current effort with that process to get us in a really good place for the budget building. Okay, Chris, anything to add? Anything you want to make sure we're doing in the interim, or? No? Good. All right, we'll revisit this on the 6th. Good. All right. Excellent. Thanks, everybody.
Just want to say we're all doing really great with our norms. Just want to say that.
Thank you. On behalf of the committee, I thank you. All right, so for the next item on our agenda, we have recommended revisions on a number of our policies. Those are detailed in the memo from our policy subcommittee, Kathy Shields, Anping Shen, and our general counsel, Jill Murray Grady. And Jill is here. I didn't even see you back there. I was like, is she joining us remotely? Jill is here to discuss the revisions.
Good evening. As promised, we are going to be coming to you pretty much every other meeting with a list of policy revisions until we're basically done for this year, and then until new ones come out that need to be revised. One of the impetuses for this year was that the Mass Association School Committee did a periodic review. They're the ones that set the templates essentially and the outline for many districts' policies, manual, and ours is based off of that as well. So in addition to some few that have come up in our own in Newton or along the way here, there's lists of ones that MASC has recommended to be revised, or in this case, some of them removed as basically redundant. The ones that are before you today are largely don't have a lot of substance change. I laid it out in the memo. There's two that were just recommended to be removed as unnecessary or redundant. And there was a merging of all the policies around school councils and student and school improvement plans in a way that just made more sense. We have the policy, Kathy Shields and I did merge them together as they suggested, but for any additional revisions to that, we noted in a track changes format, so you could see where we actually are recommending maybe a slightly different change or some sort of explanation. So the other one was a merger of what's CHA and CHC, which is essentially the development and dissemination of procedures, which is essentially superintendent and administration. It just merged the two, but we had made a couple of recommendations regarding some of the language that was in the MASC template that we didn't think really applied here or was necessary. So, I'm not going to go through them because they're largely just merging and eliminating, but and it should be, if it's not clear in the memo and in the documents attached to it, I'm here to answer any questions, or if you have any other questions, Kathy and I can answer them as we go.
Thank you, Jill. Questions on the policy revisions? Go ahead, Rajiv.
I did read through the document. Seems pretty clear and mostly administrative in terms of streamlining. If on a second read through there are any questions, should we just email you, Jill?
Sure. Email myself. I mean, Anping is part of this policy subcommittee, but he's unavailable right now. So Kathy Shields and I, but I'm happy to be the gatekeeper. So if you have something, and then I can run it through Kathy, and if necessary, Anna, depending on what the request is.
You can just copy me, Rajiv. Well, that way Jill and I can be on the same page.
Got it. Okay.
Wonderful. Well, that was easy. Thank you, Jill. Appreciate it. Continuing on, our next order of business is the review of the Perkins Eastman scope of services for the remaining elementary schools and long-range facilities and enrollment planning. And joining us remotely, I see Stephanie Gilman, Director of Planning and Project Management and Sustainability. Is Liam here?
I don't believe he's joining us tonight if he's not there.
Okay.
No, he won't be here tonight. Stephanie's been deputized.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, how are you? Good evening, everyone. So you have a memo before you in your packet about the work of Perkins Eastman and the timeline for their work. As you recall, last spring, Perkins and Eastman was hired for a school facilities and enrollment planning study to help guide short and long-term facilities planning. That work initially focused on Underwood and Ward, and what came out of that is that we needed to gather additional information about our facilities. So their work is now shifting to gather additional information for 6 elementary schools. As we had, previously discussed, the additional data and information is needed, including space utilization data, building condition information for our elementary schools. So the scope of work that will cover these 6 elementary schools is attached to the memo. The 6 schools were identified by, they're the ones that have yet to be either newly replaced or renovated, and they're not already in design. In addition, we've already gathered that information, the space utilization data for both Underwood and Ward. So the schools are listed in the memo. They are Burr, Bowen, Mason Rice, Memorial Spalding, Pierce, and Williams. We actually just had a meeting today with Perkins Eastman, so they're ready to get going on this, on gathering this additional information. The timeline is outlined in the memo. We have an update to the school committee that's scheduled, I believe, for late January. And then the scope of work is actually attached to the memo. So I'll open it up for questions if anyone has.
Thank you, Stephanie. Questions for Stephanie about an item in the memo? Go ahead, Emily.
It's sort of tangentially related to what we're talking about now, as well as the conversation about is not just funding to do the elementary schools, but also the 4 middle schools and the high school. And I know we're talking about priorities and one-time funding, and I just want to put out there the fact that this has been a hot button for my colleagues. I'm looking at you, Tamika, and Pig is not here today, in terms of expanding that scope. So we have a comprehensive picture of the entire district, and that will also help inform long-range facility planning decisions down the line.
Thank you, Emily. And if you could see my scribbled note, it reads, scope of services, considering our previous discussion regarding funding for one-time needs, middle schools, which was last comprehensively looked at in, I believe, Stephanie, what, 2013?
2011 was the update of the long-range master plan.
Yes. So we've had one-off, projects. I'm thinking of the expansion at Oak Hill and things like that, but not as a block to look in depth at our middle schools and assess what do they need for our current students, for our students, how they learn today, and for the facilities of the buildings themselves. So I would like to insert and piggyback on fellow school committee member Prenner's plug for this to be something that we consider and look at in detail as we consider that previous request. Others? Go ahead, Chris.
Yes. So Stephanie, reading through the scope of this, I sort of have an idea of what the end product is going to look like, although I'm not entirely certain. You do make a comment that they're going to start with sort of one school and then go through a sort of preliminary review of that school before moving forward with the others to sort of, I assume, to see if they're on mark of what we're looking for. Will the school committee be part of that review, or will that just be the NPS administration in the city?
So the that first school that they're going to start with is really to make sure that we're gathering the data that essentially they're going out and they're gathering space utilization information and building condition data, and then they'll present it to us so that we can see what the format is, and it will be shared with the school committee. But it's really for us to kind of make sure that they're gathering what we're looking for and documenting it in a way that's clear and concise so that we can share that. And that'll be the sample that they'll then use to continue on with the rest of 5 other schools.
Okay, so that will be shared with the school committee then?
Yes, similar to the work that was done to gather the space utilization and building condition information for Underwood and Ward has been shared. It will share similarly. Yeah.
That's all.
Great. Thank you, Chris. All set, everyone? Okay. Thank you, Stephanie. Appreciate you filling in tonight and doing a really good job.
Thank you very much.
So continuing on, we have the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, MASC, resolutions. And for our resolutions this year, we utilize a slightly more efficient, or at least we hope it was more efficient process to inform our review of the resolutions, which can and has been a very time-consuming process in the past. So similar to our superintendent evaluation process, we utilized our executive assistant, Lisa Mazzola, thank you, Lisa, to compile individual reflections on the resolutions, which we will now discuss as a group for the first time. Just to put out there, those individual reflections will also be publicly posted with the meeting materials after, if they haven't already. So let's go through. Everyone has before them the copy of the resolutions themselves, and then a tabulation of our responses to each of the prompts, the resolutions themselves. So if we're looking at the first resolution, full stable funding for Metco, it seems we have 4 yeses, 3 abstentions, and 2 no. And 0 no's. So for this, in order to approve, go ahead, Paul, you're missing.
I don't have the tabulation.
Lisa apologizes. She says she forgot to send it to you.
Oh, okay.
She's sending it now.
Thank you.
No worries. All right. So full funding for Metco. This resolution seeks to, let's see, all the way at the bottom, be it resolved, seeks to approve the Massachusetts Association of School Committees to call upon the governor and the legislature to create a stable funding source for support of Metco and its partner districts, and fully fund and support provided by Metco and the cost of providing services detailed by Metco's partner districts. As I said, we had 4 yeses and 3 abstentions. So that motion does carry, but we have an opportunity to discuss it prior to voting on it. Anyone would like to share their thoughts, hesitations, comments with this resolution? Go ahead, Rajiv.
I can certainly share why I would be in favor of this. My reading is simply that we are encouraging the Commonwealth to fully fund what's already being spent to support our Metco students. And it makes sense. It's a program that's been successful. It's one we've participated in for many years. I think we are the largest Metco district.
That is correct.
Right? So in that context, getting additional funding to help support Metco within our district made sense to me, and that's why I was in favor of it.
Great. Any additional context discussion? Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I'm just going to say at the outset, I mean, I think I abstained on 4 or 5 of these. I always hate this process of like getting these sometimes oddly worded resolutions that have no, enforcement mechanism, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
With this one, as with the rest of them, reading through the words of whatever school committee put these forward, I'm just not sure I entirely understand the resolution or what the impacts would be or what the unintended consequences might be. So I just want to I'll get that out there for the over half of them that I abstained on.
Okay, appreciate that. Anyone else? Go ahead, Emily, and then we're gonna
I just
get out
wanna,
into a vote.
lay a little groundwork for a second, which is the fact that during the actual MASC conference, amendments are thrown on these. Like these things as they stand now are 95% not going to look like what they look like now when it actually ends up getting voted on. So just keep that in mind. It doesn't change what we're voting on because that's the language in front of us. But I just want to, like, for people who are not familiar with the process, that's definitely going to happen.
And Chris, to your point, there might be others or other school committee voting delegates who are going to be inserting that perspective as well, and it might refine or get fleshed out. Think of this as the draft, and for that draft, we're being asked to stand with our colleague school committee members across the Commonwealth, and so just that's a good framework. Thank you, Emily, for putting that out there. All right, I think we're ready to take a vote on this first resolution, unless there's others who would like to make a comment before we do so. All right, so I think the easiest way is just to do a show of hands. Since we already have the tabulations, we don't really need to do a roll call vote for this. In favor, those in favor of the funding for Metco resolution number 1. Okay, we have a 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, why can't I count? 5, 6. Thank you very much. 6. 2 in favor. Anyone opposed? None in opposition. Abstaining? 1 abstention. Thank you. I don't know if that's faster than doing roll call, but we'll just go with it. All right, number 2, the resolution number 2, which is a regarding investigations and recommendations for transportation bidding procedures. For this, we had 7 of us said yes. 7 of those of us who participated said yes. So that was a unanimous yes. Does anyone care to contribute what led into their thinking? Just vote. I heard you.
We
All right.
need a little more transparency.
More transparency. Fair enough. I agree. Clearly. All right. All in favor of resolution number 2 for transportation? All right. That is a unanimous vote, Lisa. Thank you. Resolution number 3, which is regional transportation. I don't even remember. What was this one? Anyone want to synopsize? Unping usually does this. Am I correct in that? All right. This one was reimbursed regional transportation. Oh, this was actually kind of interesting in light of our own private school transportation conversation we just had. For this one, we had only 1 yes and 6 abstentions. So, all right, let's just vote. Those in favor of this this item? Where was? Those opposed? Anyone abstaining? All right, so we are abstaining on the official position of the Newton School Committee is to abstain on resolution 3. Continuing on to resolution 4. This was a diversity, equity, and inclusion director. Mass recommends that all districts adopt the position of a DEI coordinator to work towards anti-racist school system at each school. For this, we had 2 yeses, 4 nos, and 0 abstention. So let's flesh this one out a little bit. Anyone care to share their thoughts and reflections on this one? I saw Emily and then Rajiv.
Well, I just wanted to say that I originally had, I think, abstained on this, or maybe I voted yes. I voted yes, and I thought that your comment was particularly compelling, which was that, you can have a district have a DEI coordinator, but it's so much more than that. Not just having it doesn't just check the box and suddenly like there's all this work that has to happen underneath it. And so I appreciated your comment.
Go ahead, Rajiv. Thank you, Emily.
My thinking here was really that districts need to be able to figure out how they're going to structure DEI efforts, how that works. There, in certain districts, they may decide that it's especially smaller ones, that it's down to the principal level, etc. So for me, this was more a matter not of whether DEI is important, but really to what extent should districts be required to structure DEI efforts in a certain way. And my feeling was they need the flexibility, much as I think I would want us to have the flexibility to think about how we want to work on diversity efforts.
Thanks, Rajiv. Paul and then Kathy.
My comment is along the line of Rajiv's, which is, as a general matter, whether it's this topic or other topics, I don't think it's wise or appropriate for MASC to recommend how districts should organize themselves with regard to any topics. There's just so much diversity and variability among the districts. It just doesn't seem to me to be an appropriate role for MASC.
Thank you, Paul. Go ahead, Kathy.
So I think my comment, the reason I supported this is because I think I was thinking of it more generally, less in terms of a person needs to be hired in that particular job title, and more in the idea of work doesn't happen unless someone takes responsibility for it. So whether it is a separate position or not, someone needs to be coordinating these efforts. And so I took it more of as a value statement rather than a structural imperative, but I see the point that you made.
Thank you, Kathy. And so I guess to put in my own words, I think you can't have the values without having the person to carry them forward. But at the same time, it is too heavy a load on one person to carry forward the entire obligation or duty to have diversity, equity, inclusion in these systems that support all students of all backgrounds if it's not embedded within your goals. So it has to be a systemic, top-down, sideways throughout the district approach. And this seems, at least as currently written, it's not enough. So again, this might get fleshed out at the conference, who knows? But it doesn't seem as though we're prepared to approve this, but let's make it official. All in favor of proposal number 4? Opposed? Abstaining? Okay, that was unanimous in the opposition, Lisa. Okay, continuing on to proposal number 5, the School Building Authority. This one seeks to expand the reach of the School Building Authority to include projects above the current threshold of funding limits. And for this one, let's see, number 5, we had 6 yeses, 1 abstention. Anyone care to share their reflections for that? Or should we just vote? Go ahead, Emily.
Because you didn't talk about the accelerated repair program, which we have benefited from tremendously, and is completely stopped right now. And so this would get it going again.
Perfect. Thank you.
Would suggest that they get it going again, but hopefully it will.
Yes. All right. Let's take a vote. All in favor of this proposal, raise your hand. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all in opposition, abstaining, and 1. Surprise, surprise. Kelsey, please. All right. So continuing on to number 6. This resolution is School Bus Stop ARM Surveillance Act and Enforcement and Penalties. This seeks to put surveillance cameras on school buses so that folks who pass a stop school bus would be captured, their license plate would be captured, and increase the penalties for failure to do so. And our committee comments were number 6. We had 6 yeses and 1 vote no. Oh no. 6 yeses, no abstentions, no votes. So let's just go ahead.
It didn't say to put cameras on buses. It said that you would get fined with if a camera caught you the same way as if a police officer saw you. It would be the same penalty. It didn't actually.
And I totally misread that.
I misread that as well.
Well, I didn't think so because I
installation and use.
And that was the part that I thought would be tricky for districts.
That's what I.
Oh, I thought it was much more geared. I thought that was the.
No,
well,
no,
let's not argue. It doesn't matter. We're all going to say yes.
All right, I'll be quiet.
But it is to install cameras at some cost. So some districts are going to struggle around this one. But anywho, I think we let's vote on that. All in favor of this proposal or this resolution? Got 7. So unanimous, Lisa. Thank you. Continuing on to number 7. This one's related to MCAS scores. Our committee gave 6 no votes and 1 abstaining. This resolution seeks to essentially just summing it up, contract the use of MCAS testing for graduation rates and other uses. Any comments, reflections, thoughts on this one prior to us taking a vote? Go ahead, Mayor Fuller, and then Paul.
I'll just note that it also includes the wording enacting a moratorium effective immediately.
Thank you, Mayor Fuller. Go ahead, Paul.
For a lot of reasons, I'm against this, but including the fact that a few of the whereases are just absolutely false. That MCAS has not unjustly targeted communities with underfunded public schools. In fact, one of the purposes of MCAS was to provide funding to targeted communities with underfunded schools. And also the next one that that it has delayed countless students from earning a diploma is actually totally incorrect. And then the conclusion, I think, is inappropriate too.
Thank you, Paul. All right, so all in favor of this proposal or this resolution? All in opposition? Any abstention? Okay, that's unanimously opposed, Lisa. All right, 8. Resolution 8, safe storage of firearms. This one was kind of curious to me because we've essentially done this in the Newton School Committee as last year, I think. I can't remember, last year, 2 years ago. This proposal seeks to empower superintendents and school committees or administrative staff, I think, to inform parents and community members about safe storage of firearms, working with their local police expert, for lack of a better way of putting it. And like I said, we have done that last year, working with our Newton Police Department folks. All right. Our committee voted 4 yeses, 3 abstentions. Anyone care to share their thoughts? Go ahead, Paul.
Again, to me, this is the kind of resolution that seems to instruct districts on how they should approach an issue or might approach an issue. And I just don't think MASC should be doing that.
Thank you, Paul. Others prior to our vote? All right, all in favor of this resolution? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All in opposition? All abstaining? So we have 2 abstaining, Lisa. Thank you. All right, what is the next? Is that it? Oh, it's an amendment. Bylaws. All right. Last was an amendment to the bylaws, and this was our committee voted yes 5 times and 2 abstentions there. This one would permit the turnover of a 3-year expiration of resolutions. Or a resolution would expire after 3 years. And were there other things? Let's see. Whatever. You can all read. And we all did. All right, let's take a quick vote on this one, unless someone would like to comment on what they were thinking. No? Okay. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. All in opposition? You opposing, Paul, or abstaining?
Oh, in favor.
Oh, in favor. So 6. 6 in favor. Abstaining? And 1 abstaining. All right. I like your very energetic abstaining arm. All right. Enthusiastic, correct. All right, thanks everybody. That was somewhat more streamlined, I think. All right, so having made our decision on the resolutions, and as Emily properly pointed out, these resolutions will change drastically at the conference itself. We now need to select a delegate and an alternate delegate to attend this year's conference. Our selected delegate will be entitled to cast an official vote on behalf of the Newton School Committee. And by the way, you are encouraged to vote as we have just agreed, though you can vote your conscience when those resolutions get changed and altered, and we trust whomever the delegate is. So we are voting for a delegate and an alternate delegate who will assume the voting rights in the delegate's absence. So would anyone care to nominate themselves for delegate status? Yes.
Question?
Yes, please.
So could you remind everyone, including the audience, what the dates
Good
are?
Lord. Lisa? Yes, exactly.
In particular, which day is the voting day? Wednesday, November 8th.
Thank you, Mike.
That's the beginning. Is that the voting day? On the 8th? Okay.
Yes. So while Lisa is verifying that information, we're working off of Wednesday, November 8th as our voting date for this year's conference. And we do need a delegate. It is a great, it's a good thing to do. It really is. At least once in your tenure. Selling it? Any takers? And normally this is an honor that we bestow on our newest school committee members sometime within their first terms. I did.
I did too.
Yeah. Any takers? Well,
For God's sakes.
we have. You mean?
Yeah,
anyone
please feel
who
free to
is
nominate
unavailable?
others. Which is what we did last year, except he was a delegate and I was the backup, so.
Good night. So I think that is a good suggestion. We'd have to verify it with Anping as to whether he would accept that honor. But in the interim, we have a wonderful volunteer from Emily. Thank you so much. We appreciate your volunteerism. And we'll take a roll call vote on the appointment of Emily as this year's delegate to the MASC conference on November 8th. Ward 1.
Enthusiastically, yes.
Ward 2.
Yes.
Ward 3 is not present. Ward 4, yes. Ward 5.
Yes.
Ward 6.
Yes.
Ward 7.
Absolutely, yes.
Ward 8 is not present. Mayor Fuller.
And with gratitude, yes.
Rapid gratitude. Lots of gratitude. All right, let's vote on I guess we'll vote on Bing. All right. Would someone care to nominate Anping or alternate delegate?
I hereby nominate Anping as an alternate for Emily.
Wonderful. Is there a second?
I second that, although he may not like that.
All right. So we have a nomination and a second. We'll do a roll call vote. Did we do that, by the way, for Emily? A motion and a second? All right. Let's flip. Let's just do this in reverse. Do we have a motion for Emily to be the delegate?
Move Emily's a delegate.
All right. We have a motion by Chris. Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, and then reaffirming that we've already taken a roll call vote on this, and Emily, you have got that honor on November 8th. It is yours. All right, so continuing on on Ping, Ward 1.
Yes.
Ward 2.
I can't, I abstain.
Oh, we're getting punchy. Definitely punchy.
All right, Ward 3 is unfortunately not present. Ward 4 is a yes. Ward 5.
Yes.
Ward 6.
Yes.
Ward 7. Yes. Ward 8 is also not present. Could have been her. And Mayor Fuller.
Yes.
All right. That motion carries with one abstention. Okay. Our last order of business tonight is to do our annually required vote to appoint Lisa Mazzola as our school committee secretary, AKA our executive assistant, with our gratitude and our thanks. Is there a motion to appoint Lisa?
I move we appoint Lisa Mazzola as the secretary.
Thank you, Chris. Is there a second?
I second that motion.
Thank you, Emily. Whether she wants it or not, it is hers. Hers for life, it seems. All right. We have a motion and a second. We'll now do a roll call vote. Ward 1.
Yes, with many thanks.
Ward 2.
Yes.
Ward 3 is not present. Ward 4. Yes, yes, yes. Ward 5.
Absolutely.
Ward 6.
Yes.
Ward 7.
Yes, thank you,
And-
Lisa.
And Mayor Fuller.
Sorry, Lisa, it's unanimous, yes.
This was an enjoyable topic. All right. So with that, we have concluded the posted business for tonight's meeting. Our next meeting will be Monday, November 6th. We will have an update from the Newton Schools Foundation, a class size report on middle school and high school, as well as a review of of elementary arrays and our priorities list that will be worked on by our mayor and our superintendent. Thank you to our central staff and a big thanks to everyone who came and watched tonight's meeting. We very much appreciate it. Our meeting is adjourned.
Recordings.